Just a reminder, you might be asking why a new report card, new progress reports. Really, we're just trying to give you a more accurate view of what student learning looks like and share with you their progress along the year more accurately than we have in the past. So that is our mission. This is our first year doing it, so it's not going to be perfect. And we appreciate your patience and grace as we figure stuff out. So we're going to move on along here. So Spencer, you want to give us the next slide, please? Our agenda tonight, we'll do some introductions. I'm going to give you the timeline of when our trimesters are this year, go through our grading scale, look at where you can find our proficiency scales on the Lindbergh website, give you a look at what the progress report is going to look like from the parent view, and then we'll have a little time for Q&A at the end. Next slide. Here's our team for this evening. Hopefully they're going to unmute and join me here and say something, but we have Mrs. Becky Donzie, fourth grade teacher at Long Elementary School, Mrs. Samantha Gadsmeyer, third grade teacher at Dressel Elementary School, and Mrs. Jessica McCarthy, fifth grade teacher at Kennelly Elementary School. And we also have Mrs. Michelle McCroy, who is our student information system and core data specialist in the district. And I am Craig Hamby. I'm the director of elementary education. I think I forgot to introduce myself as I started talking. So here is our timeline for the evening. And all those panelists, I want them to make sure they know they're welcome to speak at any time. This is not the Craig Hamby show. They can jump in whenever they would like. So our timeline for our trimesters, our first trimester is actually going to end here in the next week. And we have our records day on November 8th. Our hope is to get those report cards up into SIS by November 11th. And then we have parent-teacher conferences or family-teacher conferences starting the week after that. Mid-February, right in the middle, I think February 15th will be the end of the second trimester. And then we will have our final report card at the end of the year. Now you see at the bottom, I put on track or not for the progress reports. And then the actual grade level report card is the one in May. And that will be determined if a student met their end of year outcomes. So these the first two are progress reports, just letting you know, is your student on track? All of our priority standards, our proficiency scales are developed as end of year outcomes. So we're trying to get the finish line is at the end of the year. We're trying to get our students to mastery of these objectives by the end of the year. And along the way, we're going to let you know if students are on track or if they're not on track. And then the final one, we call that the report card, because that's going to let you know, here's where we ended up. We know what the finish line was. Here's where we are. Did we make the finish line? Did we come a little short? Did we surpass the finish line? We're already started on the next lap around the track. And here is our grading scale. So moved away from the traditional grading scale into this, hoping that it would still make sense for everyone. So I'm going to start at the top here and we'll work our way down. EE is for exceeding expectations. So those are the students who have gone beyond mastery of our grade level standards, and they're working beyond that. They've transferred their knowledge to another context. They're working at the next grade level standard, and we're challenging those students within the classroom. ME is our target. That's where we want to be at the end of the year. Mastery of essential skills. That means they have met those end of year outcomes that we had set, and that's where we want to be. And we're very happy if we get there. Now, we're also happy with those kids who are exceeding expectations, and we'll continue to push them. Nearing mastery, we're doing some hard work. The student is making continued progress towards their outcome. Not quite there to mastery, but along the way. So in the first trimester, second trimester, it's perfectly normal to see some nearing mastery because we may not have taught all the way to the mastery level just yet. Same thing with still developing. Now, that's a little bit further back. The student is starting to develop the skills they need to master the standard. So it's kind of a starting point. You're getting the prerequisite skills, you're understanding the vocabulary. But once again, if you see an SD on a progress report, that might be completely appropriate for where we are in our instruction at that time. AC could be seen as area of concern, or the student needs more. It's a student who needs more support than we expected. We may be using an alternate curriculum. So the AC could also stand for alternate curriculum, which means if you're in third grade, you're not ready for that. We have to go back and kind of give you some of the second grade curriculum to get you up to speed. But we want to make sure that we let parents know it's like, okay, we're a little bit behind. We're going to keep working. But wherever you are, if you're at EE or AC or anywhere in between there, We want to be communicating exactly where your student is in their learning and what's next for them. If something is left blank on the progress report, that means that we did not assess that standard this trimester. So sometimes there are things that we don't get to yet. We may not get to it till the third trimester, or it might be something we're not assessing that trimester, and we're going to leave that blank. And then our final mark you might see on the grading scale is MP for modified programming. Most often this will be for students who have an IEP and they're going to special education and they are receiving a different method of instruction. So they might be getting a different program than what we're using in the general education classroom. And if MP is marked on the progress report, then in the comment section, the general education teacher and the special education teacher will come together and they will make sure they share exactly where the student is in their own goals. And that is our grading scale. Next slide. So this, in one of my previous videos, I'd shared my bike analogy where still developing is kind of riding the tricycle, and then nearing mastery, we're up to the training wheels, and we finally get to mastery. We're riding a bike, a two-wheel bike, and then exceeding our expectations. That's when we got the dirt bike there. We're riding ramps, we're doing BMX. And not everyone gets to be a BMX rider, but we don't have to. We're trying to get to the mastery of essential skills riding the bike, but we will have some trick riders up there that are doing great. So some folks at Sappington at their trunk or treat had a little fun, and someone shared this picture with me. So I thought I would put it in here tonight. So somebody was listening, somebody watched one of my previous videos, so I appreciate that. Next slide. So on track for success. So every student kind of takes a different path. We've set up the finish line of the end of year outcomes, but students will, you've heard the analogy, not all popcorn pops at the same time. So students take different paths and they master things at different times. And what teachers will do this year with these progress reports is let you know, are they on track? Or are they not on track? So I mentioned before, in the first trimester, you might see some still developing. You might see some nearing mastery, and that is completely appropriate because we may not be in our instruction yet to that mastery level. Some standards might hit the mastery level in the first trimester, some in the second. And it may be till the third trimester before some of our standards we've taught to that mastery level. So it's completely appropriate. So you might ask yourself, well, how am I going to know? Are they on track if I see an SD or an NM? If there's nothing in the comments, then you're still on track. If a student is falling behind, we don't feel like they're meeting our expectation or they're falling behind their peers, the teachers will put that in the comments on the report card. So if you see an SD and there's no comment, that means they're on track. There's nothing to worry about. If you see an SD and it's followed by a comment, that means the teacher is going to be communicating with you that, hey, we need to make up some space here. We're falling a little bit behind. And that's also why we have our family teacher conferences right after our 2 progress reports, so that we can communicate that with families. Next slide. One of the first things, not academic, that you're going to see on the progress report is, this is the one from kindergarten, but they all look exactly the same, K through 5, are the behaviors supporting student success. So we thought it was important. This kind of goes with the Lindbergh success skills. You see those in parentheses of some things. Sometimes a student's behavior does dictate whether they're going to be successful in school or not. And we want to teach them to make sure that they can be productive students while they're in our school. And this will be, as you see at the top there, it says an X indicates a concern. So if a student was having a little trouble with self-control, we would put an X in the appropriate trimester. If it's blank, that means everything is A-okay. If you see an X, there's probably going to be a comment from the teacher, and that would probably be something you'd want to talk about at the family teacher conferences. Next slide. All right, so now I'm going to turn it over and let one of my colleagues, Mrs. Gatzmeyer, is going to talk to us about, well, I got the grades on the progress report, but I want to look at these proficiency skills and see, what were the learning targets? What does it really mean to be showing mastery in the standard? So that's great. We've got those up on our website, and Mrs. Gatzmeyer is going to walk you through how to get to those.
Hi, Samantha Gatzmeyer here. I am a 3rd grade teacher at Dressel, like Dr. Hamby said. Before I go into how to find these scales, an example that came to mind when Dr. Hamby was talking was multiplication. So in 3rd grade, multiplication is a huge thing that we work on. And before, we would only have 1 quarter to assess students whether they learned all their facts and they could efficiently and accurately solve them. Whereas now, I can progress monitor my students in the first trimester and let parents know where they are in their learning. But I have the whole entire year to kind of show growth of where my students are with their understanding of multiplication, which is not something most kids are going to get in a few weeks. So now that we have the whole year, it's a lot easier to show students growing from where they came in to where they are at the end. So as far as where to find these, if you go on a Lindbergh School's website, you click the About Us button, and that's going to bring up another menu. Next. Once you click the About Us menu, you'll see a drop down. You're going to click on Departments. After Departments, you're going to find the one that says Teaching and Learning, because standards-based learning is all about the teaching and the learning that goes along with it. And underneath that, you will see curriculum. So the curriculum that we are using in elementary right now is standards-based learning. So you're going to want to click on that. Once you click on that, you will see all the proficiency standards here by grade level. So if I wanted to know third grades, I would click on third grades document, and that is going to bring up about a 53-page document, but these are separated by subject. So if I'm looking for a particular one in math, I can click on math, and then I can click on rounding. And they're all separated by subject. They're also hyperlinked, so you can go straight to a certain document.
One other thing I want to add on that, Mrs. Gatzmeyer, Spencer, we can go back one slide for a second. This is just one snip out of that standards-based learning page. There's other videos on here that explain, about standards-based learning. And so there's some other documents on here. So if you have questions at all, this is a great landing page to find a lot of answers, not just the proficiency skills. Okay, Spencer, we're ready for the next slide. And now this is kind of getting into what this report card or these progress reports are going to look like. And Mrs. Donzie from Long Elementary is going to walk us through our next couple slides.
Well, good evening, everyone. The proficiency scales that Mrs. Gatzmeyer were just talking about are really going to be important, especially as you look at our new report card. Truth be told, our report card it looks similar to the ones we've had in the past. So if you're a parent that's gone through elementary school and they've gotten more traditional grades, the actual format of the report card looks the same. You still have reading and math, science and social studies. You also have indicators underneath, but the difference is this time, each of those indicators is going to have a progress grade, the ones Dr. Hamby referred to earlier. So for example, you'll see reading here. This is a 4th grade report card. We have the category of reading foundations, and underneath it's phonics and word analysis. So the bolded categories are not going to get a grade, but we will be scoring all the indicators underneath. If the teacher or the classroom hasn't gotten to a specific indicator, which there are a lot, and as Mrs. Gatzmeyer said, multiplication is a year-long process. Many of our indicators are also a year-long process. So you will not see a grade in some of these boxes, especially first trimester, but then as the year progresses, you'll see those marks get filled in and hopefully growth throughout the year for each of the indicators. Next slide. This is just more of an overall, I wanted to give you a full view of what the report card would look like. Here we have the categories of reading, writing, and math. And so you can see there are several indicators that will be receiving grades. There are a few grades filled in here for a modified program for one of my students, but each of the bolded categories has many different subcategories that will be graded, and this will look similar across elementary. Next slide.
Actually, Spencer, can we go back to that one for just a second, please? So I wanted to add on here, Ms. Donzie. So this is where kind of get an idea how this is going to look differently than previous report cards. So instead of just getting a grade in reading, grade in writing, grade in math, you can see that we're looking at each individual standard. So a real good look at how this is going to be different than our previous report cards. Thank you, Mrs. Donzie.
Mm-hmm.
And our next slide, we have Mrs. McCarthy from Kennerly is going to talk us through our next slide.
Hi, everyone. So just like Ms. Donzie was saying, you can see at the bottom here, there is a report card for a 5th grade student. And you can see that there's many blanks on there. That is because we have not taught those standards yet, and that is okay. You also will see that there's going to be lots of still developing and nearing mastery on your child's report card this first trimester and second trimester as well, because like Ms. Donzi and Ms. Gatzmeyer have touched on, we might not have hit all of the learning targets to mastery yet. So you can look at the proficiency scale above that report card there, and in that mastery section, there's multiple learning targets that have to be met for that mastery. So for this example right here, for multiplication, we only have done whole numbers. So there's no way that a student can fully master that standard yet. So it will be very normal to see still developing and nearing mastery on your child's progress report at this time.
Thank you, Mrs. McCarthy. And now, Mrs. McCroy, our data specialist, is going to show you what it's going to look like from a parent perspective when you log into the SIS portal.
Hi, everyone. Do keep in mind that we will still continue to email out the progress report at the end of the grade cycle. You are able to go into the SIS parent portal and see information regarding your students' grades at this time, but the grade cycle is still open for teachers and they still are working on grades. So nothing is set in stone if you look right now. That is all set once we send the report card to you. But once you log into the parent portal, you can see grades in two different spots. One is the left-hand menu underneath current academics and grades, and the second is underneath the current grades tile, and then you can select go to grades. Next slide, please. Once you click that and move into the next screen, you're going to see two tabs, traditional and standards-based. So you're going to select the standards-based tab, and that's going to list all the courses that your student is enrolled in for the elementary grade level. So those are all still the same as before. Next slide. Then you can select the toggle underneath the more, underneath each of the subjects. So for homeroom, you can open up that one, math, reading, writing, and language, and that's going to list each one of the standards. You can see that the student's indicator will be listed underneath the T1, T2, or T3. And if you see a blue T1, you select that as the hyperlink. Next slide. You'll see any comments from your teacher, from your student's teacher here would be listed on a box that pops up. And then you can select the close box and then you can move on to the next subject. So you can go through each one as a line item. We will still continue to email you the report card, but you are able to look on the portal, but do keep in mind that they are still working on grades at this time. So if you do see anything listed, it's not going to be final until the grade cycle closes on November 8th. That's it. Next slide.
All right, thank you all. So we didn't have a lot of stuff in the Q&A as we were going here, but if you have questions about anything with standards-based learning or the progress reports or report card, you can email me, chamby@lindberghschools.ws. And we also have an ongoing Google form. That QR code will take you straight to a Google form and you can put questions into that and I'll be happy to email you answers. So feel free to ask questions at any time. You can ask your teachers, you can ask your building principal, or you can come straight to me and we will get you an answer. We thank you all for joining us tonight. And I thank my fellow panelists for going through and explaining things. And I think we have one last slide. And that might just be me saying thank you again. Yeah. So thank you. If you have any questions at all, feel free to reach out and we were happy to answer them.